Apparently it's 3 o'clock, so I should start. Right, so Mali packaging for distros. So this is intended to be a discussion rather than me telling you a lot of things, not least because I don't know very many things. I'm not a graphics developer. It's absolutely hilarious that I'm doing this work. I have no idea what I'm doing, although I have learned some things in the last year or so about how this stuff fits together. So just start with a few things on what has happened since last time we talked about this in Hungary, and what's sort of done, and the things I found that were a problem. Ideally we can talk about what to do next. So about 2 years ago, changed the license on the binary drivers so they were redistributable. This was a major step forward, so they could at least go in distros. I was tasked with doing some packaging, and I got quite a lot of help from Guillaume Tucker, who used to be at ARM but is now at Collabora, who actually knows about graphics, so he did most of the kernel fettling. Most of the people in this room probably know this, but just so we aren't confused, there's three main vintages of Mali driver: Utgard, Midgard, and Bifrost, or possibly Bifrost. Anyone know? So Utgard is the old Mali 200 and 400 series, high key, and all-winner A20 boards. A10s have Utgard as well. I think they might be Mali 200s. Midgard is in quite a lot of things, so Firefly, anything RK3288 based, Juno, Chromebooks, or early Chromebooks, Arndale, probably some other things. And Bifrost is kind of current and new, so anything new and shiny that comes out is probably those. Midgard and Bifrost actually use the same kernel driver, but with different versioning, because ARM are crazy people. So they literally release the Midgard kernel driver and the Bifrost kernel driver, which are identical pieces of software with like S, Midgard, Bifrost throughout, and different version numbers. So that's slightly mad, but there you go. As a result of some fiddling about, we have some Debian packages in Debian testing. So there's a kernel driver in the actual archive main, standard DKMS out of tree module package. So you install it and it builds itself against the installed headers. If you install a new kernel, it rebuilds itself with a bit of luck. And that works. I've got that working on 32 and 64-bit now. And it has a load of patches. And there's clever mechanisms for, depending which version of the kernel you've got, apply this set of patches, and that works. It was working before I went on holiday, but I see there's been a 4.18 since then, so it's probably broken again. I don't know. And there's a binary driver package, mali-midgard driver, which is obviously a non-free since January. So in theory, that works. There are some ifs and buts about that. I've had absolutely zero complaints, which probably means nobody's using it, but it may mean that it just works. The other thing that has been done is made some wiki pages, again with Guillaume. So the Mali graphics page is like the arrival page, which should tell you which version of stuff you should use to make it work on your hardware and what exists. And mali-midgard is a developer-oriented page about what we've done so far and what the plan is. The important thing is there is now a mailing list, because it seemed there was no place to have this discussion in the world that I could find, so I made one. It's currently extremely exclusive. There are 3 of us, so it will be good if some more people joined. This isn't just about binary packaging. This applies to free driver packaging at some point in the future, I hope. So please join if you have any clue and are interested in making this less broken. That will be useful. So a bit of info. The packages that are packaged at the moment are what ARM call R16, which is from about a year and a half ago, mostly because that's the last release that worked on X. I don't know about you guys, but I use X, so anything that doesn't support X is kind of useless. As I say, it works with current-ish kernels. The main catch is that in practice, it probably only works on Firefly boards. It might work on other RK3288 boards if you're really lucky with your power domains, because that's the only thing that has the DTB info for Mali upstreamed. Just to explain how the relationship between the binaries and the kernel driver works, There's sort of nominally, you need a matching kernel driver for your binary, except that it doesn't have to actually match. It has to be up to 4 versions off-ish. Exactly, it depends. As I understand, that is the check that's implemented in the driver. So even if it would work with a slightly older one, it'll complain, and it might not actually work with an older one, but it won't complain. I'm not sure exactly how that works. So current drivers are R21, which need a different version of the kernel driver than the last one that worked with X. So we have a bit of a, we got to the stage where we go, do we move forward or do we stay here? So I've also done UtGuard and Bifrost packages with the same packaging layout, but I haven't actually uploaded them yet because partly of this kernel driver versioning issue and like where do we go from here. Just so you understand, the Bifrost R21 is exactly the same, sorry, Midgard R21 is exactly the same as Bifrost R9, so there's an offset of 12 in the version, kernel package version numbers. But yeah. So the main issue is that is there anyone from MPG in this room, by the way? No, of course not. Damn. That's a pity, because we kind of need those people to come here and watch us all complain, and we might make some progress. Until that happens, we're kind of talking to ourselves. So they're building with a very embedded mindset. So a build of the binary driver is for a particular GPU, a particular platform, a particular version of the kernel driver, a particular display type, you know, is it Wayland or frame buffer or X, and obviously 32 or 64-bit. So you have this massive matrix of possible binary drivers, and that is the exact opposite of what we want in distro world, which is a generic driver that will work on a load of hardware, and really doesn't care which display system you're using, because that's nothing to do with it. As I say, ARM have dropped X support from about a year and a half ago. They don't care about that anymore, which is a bit of a pain because users do. The other thing I came across was EGL-vend, which is, so at the moment, the binary install mali.so has a whole lot of symlinks from the Mesa library and the X libraries, whatever libraries it implements. So it just takes them over. So you can't have some non-Mali Mesa stuff as well. Everything goes into the new binary. EGL-vend is a mechanism for a shim layer so that you can install different binary drivers and non-binary drivers for different graphics cards. So you could have more than one thing in your system, which now we have working PCI and stuff is an actual possibility. So ARM is not doing that yet. They could probably be persuaded to. Might be useful. The main thing is that in order for this to work, especially for more modern current releases, is that we need the DTB info for each board. Otherwise the driver doesn't know where its memory is and its interrupts and so on. So yeah, just a bit more detail on each binary picks one of these things and is built for that. So power control is one of the things that makes them platform specific. You know, the driver for the GPU is reasonably generic, but the problem is that there's and switch this power domain on to make it work, on this other power domain. And that's tends to be built into the driver, although of course it should be in the DTB information. And for some boards it is, for some it isn't. The other thing we have is that ARM have been using a slightly different syntax, spec, DTB details from what was agreed upstream. So ARM put this kind of generic, it works for Mali 6 XX, all of them. And the upstream people said, no, we don't like that. I think they've been bitten before by things that claim to be for all versions of this particular hardware and actually only work on some of them, and you end up needing a different driver. So you go, no, you've got to make a specific list of which things it works for. So that's what's been upstreamed for Firefly. At the moment, the ARM are going, well, we've done it like this. Why can't it just be like that? And you go, well, because they didn't accept it. So it would be useful to get a bit of feedback on whether this is the right way to go. If so, and why. I don't really understand why. If I understood why, I could go and bang ARM developers over the head and say, this is why you have to do it like this. Meanwhile, Allwin have released some drivers as well. So this is for UtGuard. They're quite old, R6 and R8. And there's 32-bit versions and 64-bit versions and X versions, which is useful. ARM only released FB Dev and Wayland versions for 32-bit and only Wayland for 64-bit. So Allwinner changed the license to say this is redistributable, but in a really stupid way. So in fact, it's only redistributable by customers via GitHub. Pretty sure that means we can't redistribute it in a useful way, but I'd very much like a lawyer to have a look. I have the text here if anyone really cares, but it's like they've used GitHub whenever they meant open source people, probably because they didn't understand the difference, and that's fundamentally very unhelpful. Meanwhile, ARM released these same drivers under the new license. So maybe we can use the ARM license on the Allwinner binaries. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. So at the moment we're stuck, but I need to get some. We could either try and get Allwinner to do the license again more sensibly, i.e. use the ARM version, or we could get somebody with some legal clue to look at it and say, yeah, actually you can redistribute those, because they'd be quite useful. That's what people want for Hikey. And it's more complete than what ARM have released. So these are the people that have been involved. Guillaume Tucker, who, as I say, used to work at ARM and is pretty clueful. The ARM release team have been pretty helpful. Beata runs it, and there's another guy whose name I've embarrassingly forgotten, who does the work, I think. And they've been very helpful. I had a useful meeting. They're quite happy to change stuff, but they have zero authority over what gets released or how things are built. That's the developers. And I haven't really managed to talk to the actual MPG developer people yet. But I don't think there's anything stopping that. I just need to kind of go and do it. Thank you. Sumit got interested in this because he was told to make this stuff work for Hikey 960. 960? 980? 960. I made it work. Is that you? Yeah. Hi. And he made it work, but using the ARM DTB bindings. And we went, yeah, well, we need to use the upstream bindings. And you go, oh, well, now we need to get it upstream. You go, well, yes, that is kind of we need to do that. And Maxime is the guy at what used to be Free Electrons and is now something else. Bootlin, that's it, who got the Allwinner release done. But as I say, as far as I can tell, that's totally useless in terms of distro packaging. Meanwhile, the free drivers are making progress again after like a 4-year delay. So there's a project called Panfrost, which is it's a new person, Alyssa Rosenzweig, sorry, who I don't know if anyone here knows, I don't know, and Connor Abbott, who was involved in the original Lima work, and they seem to be making quite good progress, reverse engineering Midgard and Bifrost. Meanwhile, the original Lima driver has been regenerated with the new developer, and they can display stuff and have some things decoded. I don't have a good understanding of exactly what is done and what isn't done, and how long it might be before there's something I could package which would be useful to mere mortals. It'd be useful if someone could explain that. So, that's basically all I had to say. That is where I think we're at. What do people think about having 2 versions of the driver in different versions? Is that crazy? Should we just forget about all this and just make the free drivers work? Does anyone want to work on that and help me? I just want to confirm what we understand about upstreaming DTB info, and again, if anyone wants to do that for particular boards, that will be good. And yeah, this legal question of can we just use those drivers or not? Those are the questions I have. What does anyone else have to say?
I'll start with throwing out some information. And I'll use the mic. So just throwing out some information on the Panfrost work. What's interesting is Alyssa has recently switched over to developing on a Rockchip 3399, which is on the Rock 960 and one of the other 96 boards, as well as the Rock Pro 64. So there's lots of hardware that's available for anyone who wants to.
A Rock 960 is different from a Hikey 960. So there's different people's socks, but
it is different
sock. To have 960
completely different sock.
Right. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, it's the RK 3399. So there's lots of hardware available. And that's quite nice. 4 gigs of RAM on the thing.
Right.
And, yeah.
Yeah, it's true. So we do have hardware for this work. That part's easy.
And there's also a couple of...
Use a mic, please. There's 2 here.
There's also a couple of Chromebooks with the Rock chips 3399 in it.
Yes. So, yeah.
I was just going to add that most of the things that you have in your to-dos are similar to the to-dos I have in the Android world. You know, as far as similar pain points, the promised kind of ABI enforcement between the user space and kernel space hasn't, I guess it works for a little while and then it breaks and we have a big flag day and we have to change a bunch of stuff. So it's still very painful. So it would be great if ARM could try to do a better job of enforcing that, or at least to have some grace window always.
yeah, sadly, I don't have good news on that one. From what I've heard from the MPG team, is they're not doing ABI, and they're backing away from that. There's things that they wanted to do that are just going to change the ABI. That's not going to change unless the development model changes.
Can they just have compat? I mean, like, it's one of those things, like, we have a lot of work on syscalls and ioctls to provide compatibility for old interfaces for years and years. It seemed like it would be doable if the time was spent. Yeah, the other aspects of moving to proper upstream DTBs, same problem. The high keyboards all have very custom, the Mali drivers are customized for high key, so even having generic DTB wouldn't.
Yeah, so my understanding is that they've actually got a load of sort of hardware initialization stuff in the driver, so that's not a matter of having the right DTBs, that's just the drivers. Although there's only, I guess, for UTGuard there's basically A20 boards, probably quite a lot of them, and high key. So in principle, with 2 versions of the drivers might get us quite a lot of coverage.
A lot of the Samsung have various Mali in them as well.
Samsung...
Exynos.
Right, okay, and that's UTGuard as well.
Offhand, I don't remember.
I think it's Midgard. Well, Arndale was, and that's Exynos, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a generation thing, I think. The newer the Mali will be.
Right, you mean so there's different Exynoses with different Malis in? Right, okay.
It's just the name of all Samsung processors.
Right. Okay. So yeah, so all of this is kind of painful, and we don't have a mechanism for covering much hardware. So we can have some distro binaries, but we have to put lots of different binaries. I mean, at the moment I've packaged them all, so you get a pile of packages for every combination that ARM release, but that's a really random subset of the things that exist. You know, there usually isn't an X driver if it's vaguely recent, and there's often only a 32-bit one or whatever. I mean, okay, that fits the platform, so that makes sense up to a point. But yeah, so you know, we can package a pile. I have packaged a pile. We can package a pile more. So it does cover the things that ARM release. So one thing that I haven't managed to get, so talking to the release people, they're very keen on their test process. You know, anything that gets released has to be tested because it has to be supported. And I was trying to get over the idea that for this purpose, we don't really care about that. If you've got one that works and we could build, can we just have it? And if it works, people can use it. And if it's a bit broken, they really aren't going to come complaining to you much about it. But that was a bit of a step too far, really. You know, I feel that we might be able to get some movement there. Because, you know, in principle, I could build more drivers and release them to myself and package them. And someone went, oh, but that's not, like, sanctioned. And you go, yeah, but why not? What actually would be the problem with doing that? And nobody knows. But that's not the process. You know, there's a process, and changing the process is crazy talk. So we might be able to get that to happen. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I was going to say one more quick thing. The other issue I was going to say I've run into is that the binary drops and the kernel source drops are not always aligned, and usually there's a pretty big gap. So, you know, we just got the R10 Bifrost binaries out, but if you go looking at the source tree, it's like R15 now, and so there's, you know, a huge gap of source for kernels where you can't actually validate or test or that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, the release people seem to be overworked. I'm not quite sure. I guess they have other things to do. So I don't know if that's where the delay comes from. So you can see the kernel source tree. Is it up somewhere?
Well, they do just the kernel drops, but they have it up on their Mali kernel driver page.
Right, yeah, exactly. So officially, my kind of understanding is that I'm only allowed to distribute things that are on the kernel driver page. And you go, why? I don't know if Grant has any idea, but I can't get anyone give me a reason why we can't build some others and release them, use them.
Not that I can say it on the record.
No, okay, fair enough.
I don't want to say that.
So anyway, so we might be able to get some movement there. So I can go back with that. That's possibly useful.
I was jumping in quite a different direction, so if this discussion hasn't wound up, I'm not the right person to speak at the moment. So I was thinking in two areas. One is the FBDev X11 Wayland thing. Now, I think FBDev is code for EGL works.
Code for what, sorry?
EGL works, i.e. you've
Right.
got this standard embedded stack where you can take a surface and put it on a screen with no display manager.
Yes.
Now, Wayland can target EGL as its output surface, and X11 sits on top of Wayland. So while you end up with quite a stack of things, it's a surprisingly modern stack. If you take EGL at the bottom with FBDev and run Wayland on top of EGL, then you, in principle, have got a full modern display stack, including X11 as part of Wayland.
So you're saying we don't necessarily need the driver with built-in X support?
I
because
don't
we can
think so.
get it a
Provided you
different
get
way.
EGL, you can stack everything else on top of EGL, and that's actually quite distro-friendly because it's already should have all those bits.
Okay. So
I don't think that's quite correct. You don't put X on top of Wayland.
You run your Wayland, what's it called, compositor, and that provides an X11 server as well.
So if there's 3D support in Mesa, you can run Glamour to support X, but not X on top of Wayland.
Well, that's what happens when you have a Wayland. So you've got the Wayland, basically X server is a Wayland application in that kind
I
of
thought
full
that.
stack.
Right, okay.
So when I run my Wayland laptop, when I run an X program that's only X, it's talking to an X server that then renders to Wayland, which in my case renders directly, but it can in principle render to EGL. So that stack isn't actually as crazy as it sounds,
That
I think.
sounds. But so it would be really, we should probably sit down and have a go if we could make it work.
I will concede that I have not tried any of this.
Yes.
I've not touched the keyboard. These are simply my architectural ramblings.
Okay.
And there are people who have touched the keyboard, so
I think with that setup you won't have complete X kind of support. For instance, GLX won't work. GLX, so the OpenGL through X. EGL on top of X will work, I guess. But yeah, for most application it will work fine.
yeah. But it takes one of the nasty complexities out, because having to deliberately run a version that's behind what ARM has got as the latest is a very painful thing to do. So in terms of least worst, I would have thought tracking the 21s, where you've at least got the chance to influence ARM to change the bindings in 22, than to track 16. It seems a simpler thing to do. So while it's not perfect, it is.
Certainly sounds attractive. So the other catch is that moving forward the drivers, you lose platform support as well as gain it, because they just drop them off the bottom and throw them away as well. So you have to pick a particular version supports a particular set of platforms with that GPU in, and then later on, some old thing, old Samsung Chromebooks or whatever, or Juno or something, falls off the bottom, which is also dull. Now, we could make the packaging all complicated so we can have all these versions and things, but, I kind of don't want to go there unless we really have to. And there's some actual users, right? I'm not sure we have any users yet. Like I say, nobody complains about it not working, so either it's great or there are no users. Okay, but that's... So my problem is that I don't know any of this stuff, which does limit my ability. I need to sit down with some graphics people
So my other
that might be
question is another lurch, but it's what is consuming the DT bindings? Which component?
It's the kernel driver basically initializes or passes the DTB info to the driver
we
and
take
says...
the OpenARM driver, modify it to use the upstream bindings, and then that's what gets packaged?
Yes.
Yeah, I see.
Well, we don't change the binary. We change the kernel driver
the open source component.
to just recognize, say, yes, I am a kernel driver for this particular bit of hardware, and these are my resources. Dear binary, get on with it, is my understanding of how this works, which seems to work, at least for Firefly, but for platforms where it expects to get its info in DTB form and doesn't just do whatever hardware in it feels like. And I think they are moving toward, they generally agree with the idea that drivers should use DTB bindings where they exist. So I don't think that's something we have to argue about.
Yeah, I think we're just, with the common thread, I think we're going to need to try to organize some kind of summit and get the MPG developers into the same room as certainly you and John, and we'll have to figure out how wide that can be, but we'll take that into action offline.
Yes, because there's definitely quite a few people in ARM who are interested in having this working, people like John Wrighton, who's taken an interest. So yeah, as you say, having talked to the release people, the next plan was talk to the developers and see what we did and didn't agree on. So yeah, let's make that happen.
A lot of us, so there's going to be some of the not understanding what it is that we're trying to do and what we need and why what is provided. Because I mean, one of the feedbacks that come back says, well, we're providing you with binaries. We've done what you've asked. So there's a fundamental breakdown. And then there's also there's an engineering workflow that the group is committed to.
Yes.
This group we can't necessarily do anything about that, but we can possibly make offers of this is how we can take some of that load off of you. But again, that is an offline conversation.
Exactly. So as I say, they've got this idea that they build a binary for a customer, so it has all these things, all these if-defs set for the target, and that's the way they work, which, as I say, is the exact opposite of what we want. And it's a big thing to change because they've written all the code that way. Right.
But yeah, the sort of device tree stuff is. I mean, I don't have that much shame. I'd be quite happy to get my bootloader, chuck out both, and just assume whatever else I'm running is only going to interpret one of them. But yeah, it's ineffably depressing to have to say compatible strings don't match. That's a particular pain point that has almost no rational.
Yes, that's pretty basic. So obviously when ARM just did something that worked, and then when we went to upstream said, no, you need to be more specific. And do we have anyone here who can explain why that is necessary? Or a good thing?
It is exactly what you said. It's in case somebody realizes later on that not all things with this particular marketing part number are actually
the same thing.
Yeah. So the marketing decide the new thing will be the same part numbers, but and it gives you an escape hatch for later on, and it means there's less argument about what the thing's called as well, because you can just use whatever the name of the product is, and you don't need to have a debate about whether the 4XX series is the 4XX series or it's really the 410 series or 410X series and the 420X series or whatever.
Okay, so I think we can go back and say this is why. Can we please just agree? I hope we could get that fixed.
Hey, Grant, I guess you'd be the ideal person to have that conversation with them. I was surprised you didn't answer that question.
Didn't answer that because that was something from long ago that we just had that policy of be specific rather than generic, because marketing numbers mean nothing.
Yeah. On the other hand, if people are shipping lots of DTBs with the ARM upstream bindings, then production trumps rules.
Yeah, but they aren't. So I mean, the ARM developers, MPG got the message that they weren't going to get their DTB stuff for Mali accepted because it was only a proprietary driver some time ago. So they basically gone, well, no, we don't care about what you people, because you don't want to talk to us.
I mean, it's
so now that has changed, I think we can say, right, we can get them upstream if you do it like this.
Yeah.
And I think
there is some opening. There is some interest in healing the wounds, because the MPG developers feel rather beaten up. And there was, I can understand why.
Yeah.
There's also nothing stopping them having both their own old bindings and the new and the upstream approved ones and their proprietary Watsits.
Yeah, I presume you could just list them all.
Yeah, exactly. It's additive.
Or they can list the extra one, which is the generic one.
If they're really bound to it. And
exactly. So I'm pretty sure that's just something to fix. And that means we can do DTBs for more boards. So at least 3288 boards we should do DTBs for, because there's a fighting chance that, for example, this driver will actually work on a Chromebook if somebody tried. I don't know. If anyone has an old Chromebook and wants to try that would be useful.
We also have to be cognizant of the reality that Panfrost is far more likely to get a driver upstream right now with the current status quo than ARM is.
Yes.
And so the Panfrost developers they've got a much stronger argument to upstream kernel, or to kernel upstreaming, than MPG.
Exactly. So that's a good reason why the DTBs need to go in. Well, I should have gone in a long time ago. That would have been better, but we can do it now. So I think there's a few sort of special bits which ARM tend to put in their DTB thing, which aren't really hardware information. They're kind of driver flavor stuff, and obviously we'll say no to that. So has anyone had anything to do with the Panfrost people here? Are we off?
Oh, yeah, learned about it this morning.
Shut up. Yeah, sorry, good point. Well, I guess we're done. If anybody wants to help or is interested, join the list, do some work, make things better, talk to me or Grant, and we'll see where we can get to. Maybe in 2 years it will be slightly less broken.